So, dear fathers and brother, this session we are going to have a discussion and presentation and discussion on the mutual relationship between bishops and the consecrated persons. Before I welcome and introduce Father Varghese, I shall tell you a joke related to bishops. Okay. Once bishop and his secretary, once always used to say mass together in the private chapel in the bishop house. Every day, bishop was the main celebrant. One day, unfortunately, bishop was not feeling well, so bishop asked his secretary to officiate the mass. Secretary agreed. And during Mass, we remember the Pope and the Bishop. The Secretary prayed for the Bishop, our most unworthy and sinful Bishop. So, after the Mass, the Bishop was very angry and he asked the Secretary, "Why did you pray like that?" Then the Secretary said, "Every day you say the same prayer, your most unworthy and sinful servant." So he said the same words. Then the bishop said, "Okay, that is true. But when I say I don't mean it, but do you really meant it?" Okay, that's the joke. So today we have a great personality, Brother Varghese Theckanath. Congregation of the Montfort Brothers of Saint Gabriel, and he is the provincial of the province of Hyderabad. He has got a lot of things in his profile. Particularly, he is a well-educated man, so he has got a lot of degrees. MPhil in Development Economics, MA in Philosophy, MA in International Law and Human Rights from the United Nations University for Peace, Costa Rica in Central America, BSc Life Sciences, Diploma in Journalism, Certified Trainer on Climate Change, and also Fellowships and Membership, International Fellow, Leadership for Environment and Development, Member, International Association of Facilitators, and also past missions, founder, director, People's Initiative Network, the first insertion religious community in urban slums in India, and so on, national president, Conference Religion of India, CRI, and present mission, founder, director, Montfort Social Institute, Center for Human Rights and Sustainable Development Education, and is the convener, JPIC International Commission of the congregation, and he was a member of the task force of the Ministry of Labor, Government of India on domestic workers, attended 99th General Assembly of ILO in Geneva on decent work for domestic workers. Currently, member of the Transgender Welfare Board of the Government of Telangana. So, a lot more, but I am not going to say all this. So, dear Father, so you are an apt person to, Brother Varghese, you are an apt person to talk about the relationship between bishops and a consecrated person. So I think we'll get a lot of input so that we can have a good discussion. Different members of CRI may have different experiences with the bishops. So today we get a good opportunity. And dear Brother Varghese, most cordially I welcome you to present your paper. Welcome, Father.
Thank you, Father Augustine. How many of you are canon lawyers, trained in canon law? Just, okay, one. Only one? You heard the story of Christian Bernard. Christian Bernard performed the first heart transplant operation in 1967. And then, of course, and then he became a celebrity. They say that this particular surgery, the media took it up and perhaps was the most celebrated media event in the medical history. And he obviously used to be called to lots of meetings, lots of conferences, lots of talks. And the driver very faithfully used to take him. He would deliver his speech, question answers, the usual thing. So one day the driver seemed to have told Dr. Christian Bernard, "Sir, I have been hearing you so many times now that I have learned your speech by heart. Why don't I, anyway, this crowd that you are going to talk to do not know you really in person. Why not I take the opportunity of talking to them and you just sit behind, and then if there are any corrections to be made, you can, or will." So Dr. Christian Bernard seemed to have adorned the uniform of the driver, drove the driver to the venue. The speaker, the driver, went up to the stage and gave an excellent speech that was perhaps even better than what Christian Bernard would have delivered himself. And then the question hour, the questions came, and the first person to ask the question did ask a tough question, and the speaker seemed to have said, that question, I think even my driver can answer that." Now, I am the driver, the experts are here, and let me tell you, it's sheer foolishness of a moment that I consented to say yes to give this session to this eminent group that is sitting here. When Father Saju asked me, it was afterwards I realized it is rather foolhardy, but then here I am, and you know who the experts are. Now, what I'm going to talk to you about is a bit of the history of the mutual relations, how it has evolved over a period of time, certain basic elements in the canon law on the context. It's not only the context but also the content of mutual relations, and where controversies, where problems arise. And then we are living through the synod, and the final document of the synod is out. It has been pretty well analyzed from different perspectives, and that, I think, gives us the hope of mutual relations. It adds a very, very important and new dimension to mutual relations in the church. And as I said, I would have loved to speak on something that Father Gaurav talked about, because that is, I am basically a street fighter. I have lived in the slums. I work in the slums for the last 35 years, and that is my heart is, that is my work is. Now, this is more from the head rather than from the heart. But then let's I'm supposed to manage both. Now, the problem itself, when we talk of mutual relations is a way to find a balance between the charismatic, prophetic vocation of religious and the so-called controlling obligation of the bishop in his diocese as a successor of the apostles. It is this very delicate balance is what we talk about when we talk of mutual relations. It should generally have been a very complementary role, But unfortunately, there are many other human and non-human factors that come in, inspired sometimes by power, by wealth, territorial control, the absolute nature of the episcopate. Property has become a major issue today in the church, because even 20 years ago, property, land was not so expensive, especially in the cities as it is today. And that has become a major point of contention. Religious lack of so-called loyalty to the diocese, because you can be changed, you can be transferred anywhere, because the religious, by their consecrated nature of their life and obligation, they are people who are supposed to be universal, and that creates its own problems. Patriarchy and oppressive gender relations, especially women, do face tremendous deprivations, tremendous discrimination, simply because they are women. Use of sacraments as instruments of control, especially this is something again that the women religious, women consecrated people talk about, experience. And there is a moral depravity. In fact, Gaurav was giving that example, and in fact I am one of those who followed up that case. I know I met this seminarian at that time who had come for his holidays from Rome. He was studying in Rome, and the sister, he was caught red-handed by the sister himself. She came out suddenly and then locked him in the room. The cardinal was not there. You already said it is in Ranchi to happen, no? Okay, so I can say it. He was handed over to the auxiliary bishops, the two auxiliary bishops, and they said, yeah, this did happen, but waited for the cardinal to come. And the cardinal, when he came back, peace be upon him, came back, said he is so talented, his family is, and for many reasons he was excused. And that sister went to the cardinal, talked to him, went to her major superior, talked to him, and the power equations, the differing power equations, they could do nothing. And the sister, simply out of frustration, she decided to leave. She left the congregation, and yeah. So now, and this is not an isolated case. I have come across case after case after case of, and it is she rightly said, there is a certain moral depravity and the refusal of those in authority to take appropriate action. And I think this has created major fissures, and I'm afraid with the type of government that we have in India today, this is going to be a major point of crisis for the church in India. And when we talk of mutual relations, this is something that we must consider. I remember when I first floated the idea that there should be a child protection policy for the church in the CRI, in the joint meeting, the bishop said, no, this is not yet the time. And this was happening. There was one case in Goa already when a priest was arrested. And the news from the Western media was full of pedophilia cases being exposed, case after case after case. They said, no, we are not ready. But at some point of time, now we do have a protection policy. We do have a gender protection policy. Perhaps the CBCI is the only conference of bishops in the world to have a gender policy, which unfortunately most bishops are not aware of today. So in other words, this is a point of a major crisis that the church in India could develop into. Now I'm just running through. In fact, this is only half an hour that I have, and I have a very, where did this conflict and resolutions begin? The first instance that is recorded is of Saint Pachomius, the father of the Cenobite form of monastic, of a religious life, consecrated life. He apparently used to have visions of how his community should be organized, and the bishop got disturbed and seemed to have appointed a synod to examine the authenticity of his synod. And this is the first time religious life vis-a-vis the local bishop come into some sort of a conflict point. We have St. Augustine who made it a point to obtain consent from the local bishop every time he started a monastery. The Council of Chalcedon in 451 was the first universal legislation on mutual relations, and it enacted 26 canons concerning ecclesiastical discipline for clergy and religious. That was the first time when a mutual relations document was put together, and the Canon 8, Canon 4 and Canon 8 did talk about the control that the local bishop should have over the monasteries and also the religious orders. Council of Trent, after the Reformation. Chapter 9 and 11 talks again about monasteries as well as parishes annexed to monasteries being under the control, being subject to the local bishop. And of course you have the 1917 Code of the Canon Law. And see, now by that time these were seen, religious life, religious orders and the local bishops, the clergy, the diocesan clergy were seen as competitors. And now the whole issue was how to balance these two so that both are not deprived of their rights at the same time. So you have in the 1917 Canon Law very minute rules on how this mutual relation should be conducted. And of course, religious always remains the underdog in this whole. That's right through that happens, and even today. Now, things changed with Vatican II. At the same time, see now the articles that deal with precisely mutual relations is one in Lumen Gentium, Article 45. I will not go through it. I will not go through it later, but just mentioning it. But that the tone is more or less the same, but more civilized, because we were living in 1964 when was Lumen Gentium adopted, 64 or 60, yeah. Then you have Christus Dominus, the document on the bishops, and Article 33, 34, 35 are extremely important. And the 1983 Canon Law is basically putting these principles in order. I'm not going through those. Now, Pope Paul VI, after Vatican II, came up with two important documents, one in 1966, Ecclesia Sanctae, and in 1971, Evangelica Testificatio. And finally, a proper document that talked about mutual relations came up in 1978, the Mutual Relationis. I'm more or less right? Yeah. Thank you. And it was, perhaps for the first time, it was issued by the Congregation for Bishops and the Congregation for Religious. And that remained there by and large. On the 10th anniversary, it was resurrected. On the 10th anniversary of this document, a joint letter was written to the presidents of conferences of bishops and major superiors by both these congregations together. And then especially the conferences of, both conferences of of bishops as well as conferences of religious became awakened to the need, because there were also more conflicts happening, and the religious were perhaps becoming more bold and articulate and confident, especially the sisters, who often suffer in this sort of thing. So both the bishops' conference and the conference of major superiors took this up as a major. And in 1990, 10th anniversary, that was in 1988, CBCI came up with a document clarifying aspects of the mutual relations document. And see, I have been trying to get a copy of this. I would still be happy to get a copy of this document of the CBCI at that point of time, because I have been asking people, I have been asking bishops, I have been asking, including the CBCI Center, maybe Gaurav, you must use your influence to get a copy of this document. And finally, then a dialogue process started, and finally in 2006, the CBCI and the CRI signed a mutual relations document. It was promulgated by Cardinal Telesfor Topo, president of the CBCI at that time, and it came to effect on 1st June 2006. It was jointly presented by Bishop Valerian D'Souza of Pune, of happy memory, the chairman of the CBCI Commission for Clergy and Religious, and me as the president of the Conference of Religious in India at that time. Both of us signed this document. This document has 6 chapters and a conclusion. Now it had taken into consideration the Vatican II documents, it had taken into consideration the mutual relations document, everything that came up to that point of time. And by and large, it was meant to be more an inspirational document. I'll come to that. The first chapter, chapter 1, is on the universal call to discipleship. 2, consecrated life in the local church. Chapter 3 talked about general norms for partnership in the life and mission of the local church. Chapter 4 talked about collaboration of religious superiors with the bishops. 5 talked about collaboration in apostolates. And 6 talk about how do we face the future together, and of course concluding. But then what was, when was that? In 2006. Now it's 18 years before it was. What was hoped was that we will be able to come with protocols that will help actualize what is considered important in mutual relations in church. For instance, on these property issues, we did have discussions on, say now for instance, one suggestion that was made at that time. There are other differing opinions now. If a religious congregation, I'm just giving you one example of what we thought, like what the protocol should be like. If a congregation had been running an institution belonging to the diocese for say 30 years, and they have developed it, they have gone with it and all that, then generally that school should be handed over to that religious congregation as its own, and on the condition that if and when they decide to leave or whatever, then it should go, don't sell it to anybody else, but then it should go to the diocese to which it gave, that being the only obligation. So it was that type of documentation, that type of agreements, that type of contracts that was visualized as a result of these mutual relations documents that we signed. Unfortunately, because I think the party is on, people keep changing. That's a problem. People changed in both the CBCI and the CRI, and I think by and large it remained where that document was at that point of time. Not that it's a perfect document, but I thought that was one document where we agreed, and then both of us signed. Both the religious and the bishops signed after a lot of deliberations. So that's now I want to, this is to the canon law specialist. I'm entering into a territory that's not mine. With I want to briefly talk about 8 aspects. One is autonomy of religious congregations, and the 7 elements of mutual relations that should create mutual relations, but often it creates mutual non-relations. So that's now, well, this is in fact, this Dr. Anthony, I think he is from Goa. He is a Capuchin. Was he? Is he? Anthony Pinero? Oh, yeah, that's right. I'm sorry. Yeah, OCD. I thought he has great insights on this whole aspect of mutual relations. And now he defines this word. It talks relations. It may not, it's a very complex definition, but I thought it has a lot of sense, and I'm reading it. It's the sum total of the multiple modes of connection or bond, such as acts, facts, functions, positions, structures, and other conditional factors. These are conditional factors, by which the diocesan bishop and the religious are brought into mutual, that word is key, mutual directedness, mutual direction that we are able to arrive at, interdependence, co-responsibility, cooperation, collaboration, subordination, submission, and communion, in order to more faithfully and effectively realize the mission of Christ and His church on earth, according to the contribution each is called to make. It's complex, but it's rich in terms of its. Now, autonomy, that would mean following the principle of subsidiarity, autonomy of religious institutes, and that is in Canon 586. I am following the Latin canon. I could have also given parallels of the Oriental canon law, but I have not done this. Only the 586 derived from the very ecclesial nature and mission of consecrated life in the church. And autonomy is equal to authority for proper norms for itself, right to live and act as self-governing institute, that autonomy as a juridical person, to preserve, and the most important, I think, as far as religious is concerned, is safeguarding patrimony, which is a great wealth of the church. So mutual relations is basically to safeguard the patrimony, at the same time being available for the local church, for its growth, for its service. The role of the bishop in Canon 576 is fourfold. It is interpreting, constituting, moderating, and caring for religious. In other words, bishop has limited role in the congregations of pontifical right. Now this is across, but as far as pontifical right congregations are concerned, the bishop has extremely limited role. I'll come to that. But the autonomy that the religious congregations have is not absolute, but as guided by the law of the institute, approved by the competent authority in the church. In other words, the constitution of the congregation approved by the church, that's what makes it autonomous. Religious of pontifical right are directly under the authority of the Pope in the realm of governance within the institute. An authority no inferior, in other words, the bishop, cannot interfere in. This is something that we need to take into consideration. The norms of the constitutions of institutions of pontifical right assume same legal force as the pontifical laws. You get the importance of that. In the case of clerical religious institutes of pontifical right, the major superiors, all of you, become ordinaries in law. And that is in Canon 134.1. And the role of the bishop in that context in pontifical institutes remain protection and promotion in keeping in safeguarding the charism, 586. And there is, bishop has to give a report. He has that quinquennial report that he has to give to the Holy See, in which one of the things that he has to report on is the state of religious institutes of pontifical right in his diocese. In fact, these are the only two obligations that he has as far as the congregations of pontifical right are concerned. Now, so that's as far as autonomy is concerned, there are. Now, the 7, I don't know how much time. I'll briefly go through it. 7 points where mutual relations should become real but also becomes contentious. One is foundation of houses as envisaged in Canon 608 to 610. The requirement, there are certain requirements that are enumerated as far as foundation of houses in a diocese is concerned. I'm not going to read through it. Oratory suitable institute, written consent of the diocesan bishop, and formal erection by the competent authority. Now, what type of permission is required? Permission of the diocesan bishop is a must. Canon 609. Concerned competent religious superior has to obtain permission prior to erection of the community, not after it has been erected. Prior. It has to be given in writing. Bishop appoints the rector of the church belonging to the clerical religious order. Suppose along with his house a church is there, then the appointment. Prior consent of the bishop is required regarding where an excloistered clerical religious resides. Now he can't, you have the superior general has given consent excloistering somebody. Now he can't just go and live in a diocese. The bishop has certain authority over him in terms of where, and he can even be incardinated into the diocese. There are things that go with it. A separate permission is required to build a church attached to the religious house. Permission is required if the work of the house is changed from what it was when it was established. And for the suppression of a house, the bishop is to be consulted, but consent is not necessary, but he has to be consulted. Now, written agreement, there are the CBCA directive in 1990. A written agreement is required when the bishop entrusts works of apostolates to religious to be carried out on behalf of the diocese. This is Major Relations 57. The written agreement should have defined the work to be carried out, persons to be devoted to it, and economic matters. Such written agreements are required, but not necessary by law. Now the third aspect is exercise of apostolate. In deciding on apostolate, mutual consultation and agreement are required. One is to have a community established. Now, as far as apostolate is concerned, it's another. The general prescription is that religious, when they carry out an apostolate, are subject to the authority of the bishop, but not for its intent. I will come to that. There are canons that prescribe the various forms of apostolates and nature of regulations. In the case of, now the nature of entrusted works of apostolates or ecclesiastical offices. In the case of entrusted work of apostolate, religious are not only under the pastoral authority of the bishop, but also are under his direction. For instance, a parish priest, a religious who is appointed a parish priest, for instance. Now there is, this document, this Predicate Evangelium, I thought it's an extremely important document, and it is going to revolutionize, and it is revolutionizing the church. Let me tell you. And the big thing is, and that was meant to restructure the Roman Curia, and he dared to do it. And in here, the power of governance does not come from clerical state, very important to note, but from canonical mission given. And we already have examples of this being actually put in place. In other words, what it really means is religious who are not clerics and lay people can head dicasteries. And we already have Simona Brambilla, the first prefect on religious life, being appointed the prefect heading the Congregation for Religious and Secular Institutes. And we have Cardinal Angel, the former rector major of the Salesians. I happened to meet both of them. That was before she was the secretary, and he had just been made the cardinal, and he had not been given this. And then I had both of them. I also happened to chair a session of Sister Simona at that point of time. And I thought, and when I heard this announcement that Sister Simona has been appointed the prefect and Cardinal Angel as the prefect, I said, what a wonderful team that Pope Francis has brought together. Because this is a revolutionary step as far as governance in the church structure is concerned. And recently, I think the Vatican State Administration is handed over to a woman. I can't remember her name, last week, wasn't it? Yeah. So there are things that are happening. And we hope. My whole question to every bishop that I meet is, when is this going to happen in our dioceses? Which bishop will bell the cat in India to take on this initiative that Pope Francis has taken? Pastoral visitation. Bishop has obligation to visit his entire diocese. He can visit religious houses in person or through a delegate. If the bishop notices abuses of serious nature, he is to notify the competent superior. If their action is unsatisfactory, the bishop himself can act. Canon 683. And what type of sanction? Because there have been cases of sanction that religious have. A bishop can subject a religious to a penal action if the competent superior has been informed but does not act. In other words, he can't act on his own. The possible penal action is prohibiting the religious from remaining in the diocese on 3 conditions. The matter is urgent and serious, competent superior has been informed but does not act, but the bishop has to inform the Holy See of the action and the reason. Now, the 7th, taxation. Can religious be taxed? I think this is something that all juridical persons can be taxed to meet the diocesan needs. Canon 1263. Now, does this apply to religious institutes? Clarification was sought from the responsible Pontifical Council, and the response obtained on 24th January 1989 is that religious institutes of pontifical right cannot be taxed. You get that? In other words, no religious congregation can be asked to give a regular amount of money, not amount of money, a regular to a diocese, to an archbishop. Now, to a bishop. Because why I'm saying this is, there are cases, there have been demands that are made that if we are running a school, an English medium school, ₹5 should be given per student. Teachers, they have to give 10% or 5% or whatever to the diocese, and this cannot be done. Now, that does not mean that religious does not have obligation to support the diocese. They do have, and they should, but not on a regular basis. You give more than what is due, but they cannot demand from you, they cannot. Unfortunately, I've been noticing that our regional CRI, because the regional bishops have become, one region does it, then the bishops demand that of every region. And I'm afraid our regions, our major superiors give in, because it's a matter of principle. It is not the money part. It's a matter of principle, and it's a matter of our autonomy. This is something that needs to be sustained. And the CBCI directive of 1990, that's why I said I would like to get a copy of this directive, because I have not been able to get the wording, does specifically say this. So this is something that's, and if I remember, when this was discussed, Cardinal Vidyathil, who became Cardinal Vidyathil, he was the president of the CRI then, and he is a canon law specialist himself. And it was then, so he interpreted it, and it's where after that it was. So that is something that needs to be taken into consideration. Yeah. Finally, Christ is your only law. Religious should be men and women who are able to wake up the world. And any mutual relations that we arrive at is precisely meant for this. I want to take one or maybe 3 minutes more. What does this mean? Now, whether canon law, in fact, in 1916, Pope Francis met the Union of Superior Generals, and there was a question and answer session. And these were questions that were asked. For instance, one question that was asked was in 1916, I think in November or something. Anyway, that's one question that was asked was that canon law is so heavy on us that we are not able to play our prophetic role. Shouldn't the canon law be changed? And Pope Francis, of course, is very sophisticated. He said, of course, canon law has been changed during the last century twice, and totally restructured. And canon law has been changed again and again and again. Certain articles have been changed again and again. But during the last century, it was revamped the whole twice in 1917 and 1983. So certainly canon law can be changed, but discernment is extremely important, even in making. And he said, if canon law is coming in the way of religious living their prophetic vocation and their mission in the current context, we should change it. And he gave the example of 11 canons being changed. And what? So this is something that is possible. So this is. Now the synod, the church is the people of God, is at the heart of mutual relations. And this is at the heart of the synod. Synodal conversion of the church through a process that engages the entire people of God in all the local churches. And it is the recognition that the church is the people of God. And this is basically the base on which mutual relations need to be grounded and synodality need to be grounded. And the goal of mutual relations is to live synodality of communion, participation, and mission. Mutual relations is an experience of transfiguration. I'm just the final document of the synod. Here are a few possible directions that we should really take on when we talk of building mutual relations in the church in India today, or for that matter, anywhere. And the document that is coming up, the committee that has been, I think insights from the synodal document, the final document of the synod, need to be very strongly used. I'm just giving a few quick, the baptismal identity and dignity of all. Church as the people of God. Transition from spiritual conversion to synodal conversion. Spiritual conversion, that inner conversion is necessary, but it is for living in communion. Synodal mission as disciples. The synodal spirituality that the final document talks about. Prophetic synodality, and the final document uses this word prophetic 16 times, and that only to emphasize how important the prophetic dimension of the church the synod visualizes. The ecclesial discernment and unity that is necessary, inclusive lay participation and decentralization, transparency, accountability, evaluation, structures in place. Most important, this is article concerning religious life itself, and I'm just quoting just two aspects of what Article 65 on religious life talks about. They, that is religious, are called to interrogate the church and society with their prophetic voice. This is our obligation, and this morning, and I'm sure the previous sessions, we are talking about, do we have the courage, the audacity, the necessary spiritual stamina that is necessary so that we are able to, speak to truth to power, as was said, interrogate the church, interrogate the society. Do we have the courage for it? Do we have the stamina for it? Do we have, because this is our obligation, and the synodal document talks about, and then it also talks about synodality invites, sometimes challenges, pastors of the local churches as well as those responsible for leadership in consecrated life and in the movements to strengthen relationships in order to bring to life an exchange of gifts at the service of the common mission. These are two elements. There are two other elements in that article I will not go into. Now we are living in a very historical moment. The church in India, as has been said last session, before last session, I'm sure, church lives at the crossroads. Crossroads is always can be promising, also can be discouraging. It's promising, yeah, it just finished, yeah. Because new directions can be taken, and this is the moment where church can take new directions, and it is the obligation of religious 125,000 religious women and men in India today to take precisely that new directions. The political, economic, social realities of our country presents a great opportunity for us to do this. Now, whether we will do it, this is the question, and you are great people responsible for large number of religious in India, the leadership of the religious in India. That means building internal cohesion, ability to manage crisis, transition, looking at transition and growth, managing gender relations justly, building leadership for the future in the church, management of resources, because our properties are already enumerated, and it's a matter of time before properties are claimed. From leaders, this is very important, you are all leaders. From being leaders for the church or religious congregations to becoming leaders of the church and of the provinces. In other words, we need leaders not only for the church, but of the church. Now, who will build the cat? It's building consensus as a way of life, especially when we talk of mutual relations. And I always use this Manfred Neef, fundamental human needs, 9 fundamental human needs, informed by transcendence in all things. This is an economist, and this is an economic theory. How this can be applied not only in mutual relations, but mutual relations within our communities, within our families. This is something that I have tested personally, what it means. So I'm sorry to have exceeded the time and keeping Father Augustine on tender hooks. Thank you. Yeah.
It is not easy to present a paper on mutual relationship between bishops and consecrated persons